Welcome to Philanthropy in Action. Together we engage amazing people who have given their time, talent, and treasure to change the world. I am Maxim Thorne and I teach Philanthropy in Action at Yale University. Few individuals have affected our world more positively than civil rights icon Julian Bond. As a young college student, Julian helped found the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He was a student of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he grew up to become chairman of the NAACP. He is a distinguished professor at the University of Virginia and American University. Julian, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to our students from Yale University who are joining our conversation to discuss how Mr. Bond became an activist and how he's become an iconic figure in using your time, talent, and treasure to do so much good for the world. Julian, how did you become an activist, and do you consider yourself to be an activist today?
I became an activist because someone asked me to join an activist movement. I was asked by a fellow student in Atlanta at Morehouse College to join the beginning of Atlanta's participation in the sit-in movement, and he was so compelling I couldn't say no to him, and so I found myself caught up in it, and I've been caught up with it ever since. So yes, I do consider myself an activist today. Perhaps a different kind of activism, but it's still activism for the same sorts of causes, although the causes have grown. But yes, I am still an activist.
Was that an easy decision, though? I mean, when you say someone asked you to join the sit-in, we're talking about a sit-in movement in Georgia in a period in which that was not a safe thing to do.
Well, I knew the possibility was that we'd get arrested. I knew getting arrested was likely to put a mark on your forehead, do not employ. I knew that the possibility was of some harsh treatment at the hands of the police or white bystanders. But I also knew that other people like myself, young people, young black people at other college campuses like mine had done this, and they had braved these possibilities without turning back, and I thought I could do the same, and I found something someplace in me that made me do the same. And so even though there was some hesitation, I could overcome it.
When you made those choices, knowing who your parents were, and you could tell us who they were, I know who they are, how did they deal with the choices you were making at that time as a young man?
My parents were academics. My father had been the president of Lincoln University in Pennsylvania and was also been the president of Fort Valley State College in Georgia, and at the time this occurred, he was dean of the School of Education at Atlanta University. My mother had been a classroom teacher and later became a librarian. So there are people interested in education. And so the idea that I would risk my education by getting arrested or by dropping out of college was just awful to them. But at the same time, they were very supportive of the civil rights movement and encouraged me to get engaged in it. And so torn between these two things and full of my promise that I would go back to school someday and finish my degree, which I did do, they acquiesced.
Beyond putting your education at risk, though, many people like yourself and other members of SNCC were putting their lives at risk, or at least their bodies at risk, weren't they?
Sure, all of us were, but again, you thought the prize is worth the risk. The prize was to eliminate the segregation system that just did so much harm to black people in the southern part of the United States and would do harm to me, was doing harm to me. It cheapened the worth of my college degree. Under the system, my education at Morehouse College wasn't as good as an education at the University of Georgia. And so I wanted to do all I could to eradicate these biases and differences that pressed down upon me and other people like me because they were killing me, they were hurting me, they were harming me. And that hurt and harm was greater than whatever hurt or harm might come to me because I was in this movement.
Thank you, Julian.
Hi, I'm Stephen Banks. You've spoken about the importance of protecting those rights guaranteed to us in virtue of where we are born, but what is the role of philanthropists and activists in protecting the rights of those beyond our borders?
Well, I think the role of any of us, philanthropists or not, in protecting rights beyond our borders is nearly the same. Of course, philanthropists are different. They have resources they can give, but you and I, who may not have these resources, have an equal opportunity to do what we can. If we know that some people are being mistreated far from our shores and treated badly, and there's something, anything at all that we can do about it, whether it means giving money to some organization that's helping them or doing something to take these people from where they are and put them in a safe place, I think it's our obligation to do it. So whether it involves going in our pockets and pulling out some money and saying, here, this will help you out, or whether you and I say, let's go there and do something to help them, I think we owe a responsibility to do them, and we ought to do it. If we don't do it, we're not worthy of being the kinds of people we like to think we are.
Do you think that we're doing more today than at a previous time to be responsive to the needs of the many?
I think we're doing more to be responsible of the needs of the needy, far away from us than we were in my time. Perhaps in some senses to the detriment of those people who are right here in our own backyards. For some reason, I think Americans have a fascination with people who are far away from them, greater than the fascination they ought to have with people who are right around the corner. But having said that, I think there's greater emphasis now on helping people worldwide than there was when I was the age of these students. And I can't say that's a bad thing.
In a previous interview, you were a bit critical about how heavily the civil rights movement relied on the leadership of Martin Luther King. I was just wondering what you think successful leadership is, whether it's supplemental to these movements, and how leaders can contribute their time, talent, and treasure to these movements without being the sole propeller of them.
Our critique of Dr. King, and remember, we loved Dr. King, and we admired him a great deal. We thought he was bravery personified, somebody worth following. Our critique of him was that he often, without meaning to, said to local people, I'm going to take care of your problems. You don't have to worry about these things. I'll do it. And I say this is not something he was said. This was something they imputed to him, and as a consequence, felt themselves less likely or less able to join in helping themselves. Leadership is always a necessary component of social change, but that leadership doesn't have to stifle. And we believe that Dr. King's persona, again, not through his own making, but through the eyes of others, stifled their own ability to act as leaders. I remember I was in a hotel in Atlanta once having a meeting with Dr. King and passed by a bunch of maids in the hallway. And one of them said, Dr. King just went by. I know all our problems are going to be solved now. Apparently they had some dispute with the hotel. But Dr. King was not there for their dispute with the hotel, although I'm sure he sympathized with it. He was there for entirely different purposes. But they had transferred their responsibility to do something about their condition to this man who was just passing by. So that's our argument with him. And again, it was not a personal argument with the persona. It was the argument with the people who thought this of him and imputed to him the ability to solve their problems.
Do you think that therefore there's a challenge with charismatic leaders?
Oh, surely there is. A great challenge, again, and typically it's not a challenge that they have engendered themselves, although sometimes they have, but it's a challenge that others have imputed to them, and once imputed to them becomes realistic and real. And so you think Dr. King is going to do this for you and do that for you and do this for you, and it lessens your responsibility to do something for yourself. No one becomes free because somebody else helped them do it. They became free because they acted in their own regard. There may have been other leadership figures, noble figures, brave figures who helped along the way, who pushed, who pulled, who did all the things we expect of some leadership figures, but it was the individual who said, I'm going to do this. Those are the people who make the real change.
Hi, my name is Leslie Bull. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
My question is, our last guest here, Bruce Cohen, mentioned when speaking about LGBTQ rights that the fight is never over, and used the civil rights movement as an example. And I was just curious to hear your thoughts on the statement that the fight is never over, and what you think the main area in civil rights we should be fighting for today is.
I hope he wasn't saying the fight will never be over, because I believe the fight one day will be over. The fight for black rights is not over. The fight for LGBT rights is not over. These fights are ongoing. And while progress has been made in each of these two disparate fields of endeavor, gains have been made, victories have been won. This is not the same country today for anybody in either of these groups today as it was, say, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So change has been made, and change is being made almost daily. But the day is going to come, I believe, that we'll say, wow, we've put all that behind us. And we've made so many victories that there's very little to worry about now. The ongoing battles in the search for civil rights, I think one thing that we've not paid as much attention to as we ought to, and this is just one of many, is the problem of segregated housing. If you look around the United States, it's still a matter of fact, despite a recent report by a right-wing group in New York City, that racial segregation in housing had almost disappeared. First of all, it's not true. Secondly, it's pervasive. And thirdly, it just harms people of color so dangerously, and I'm just amazed that we've not done more about it. If you live in a segregated system of the city, and you're black, you're separated from the best schools, the best houses, the best opportunities, and the chances of you achieving those things are diminished because of where you live. So to the degree that we're able to stop this physical segregation of people, that's the degree to which they're able to have access to these opportunities and their condition improves. That's something we need to work on.
So sort of on a related note, the problems have obviously changed, and you mentioned earlier that your activism has changed. I wonder, how have those changes impacted your search for financial or philanthropic donations, either financial or time, treasure, talent? How do you go about persuading people to contribute to the cause?
You know, one of the great changes, I've been thinking about this recently because I'm trying to raise money for something else, is that when I began this, I was asking people for $50. Now I'm asking them for $1 million. And I'm not saying they answer more quickly to either one of these than they did, but the ability of people of means, of great means to give, hasn't improved. They've always been there. They've always had the possibility. But now I have access to them in ways I don't think I had access to them as much now as I did then, as much then as I do now. And so the amounts of money we're talking about are much greater. The amounts of money required are much greater because Maxim and I walked the streets of New York City, knocking on rich people's doors, asking them for help, and we're asking for more money than we would have been doing had we been doing this 30 or 40 years ago. I don't know if it's because we're bolder and more able to ask for more, or because we know the people we're asking have more and are therefore able to give more. But there is more money in the world, and the need for money is as great, if not greater, than it was before. So I'm not sure how much has changed except the amounts of money we can ask for and the amounts of money we can expect to give.
On that note, there's an argument that the kind of capitalism that was created and developed and evolved in the last, say, 100 years has led to the kind of extreme wealth or greater wealth among more people in the United States, for example, or Western Europe. Is that, you think that is part of why we experience greater freedoms? Or is there something else that interacts with our system that allows not only more money to be flowing than, say, it was in the early 1900s, but also allows more rights to be flowing across discrete groups?
I'm not sure if there's a real connection between the amount of money available and the liberties won over a period of time. There probably is, but I can't think of it right now. I think what really happened over, say, the years between 1900 and today is that the people who were oppressed, black people, working people, women, people in the gay and lesbian communities, all these disparate people found their voice and found the ability to struggle and found the ability to say, I'm not taking this anymore. I'm going to fight as hard as I can. I'm going to join in with others of a common cause to address these issues, and I'm going to reach out into the larger community and find people there who are my potential allies and make them my allies. I'm going to do all these things, and these will change my condition and eventually will change the condition of all of us. I think that's really what's happened, from 1900 until today. I don't think the amount of money available has had that much to do with it, although somebody could make the argument and convince me. But I think it's the ability of the people themselves to do it, not the money.
Building on that,
but there is more money involved. I'm thinking, I remember some years ago, I had gone to a wealthy man to get some money for the NAACP. I was chairman of the board, and asked him for $100,000, and he said, no, that's not enough. And I was astounded because I was asking for $100,000. This man gave me $20 million, with the provision I spend it between July and November of 2000. So in these few months, I had to spend all this money. And think of this, you have to spend this money, you have to spend it in a legal way, you have to spend it in an effective way, you have to show some result of it. I was lucky enough to find a remarkable woman named Heather Booth who could spend this money for me, spend it honestly, fairly, judiciously, spend it in a proper way, and knew how to spend it, and knew who could help her spend it, and she did it. But the thought that I would have somebody give me $20 million never crossed my mind until it came into my lap, and I've been looking for this guy ever since.
Take us back to your SNCC days. When you said you knew you risked arrest, you knew you risked not finishing college as did many other folks. How did you young people think about this financially? In Harry Belafonte's memoir that was just published, he notes that there were hundreds and thousands of people and young people and children that were arrested in Georgia and in Albany, Georgia, for example. And you had to post bond and bail. Where did they think the money would come from? And oftentimes there wasn't money, and one had to raise money in the North and elsewhere to get these folks released from prison. How did you and others put yourself at risk without the resources of who would pay your bail?
Well, probably foolishly, we didn't know the resources were there when we risked going to jail. I don't think we thought that far in advance that when I was arrested in Atlanta for the first time, I did not think Joe Blow will pay my bond. I didn't know Joe Blow. I didn't know who might do it. In fact, I don't think I ever thought about it at all. I knew I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life in jail. And as it turned out, I spent just an afternoon. And someone I did not know stepped up and said, I'll pay not my bail, but the bail for all of us, or someone's. I happened to live in Atlanta at the time, a community which had enough people, black people of wealth, and not enormous wealth, but just ordinary wealth, who could say, well, I'll put up this, I'll put up that, I'll put up that, and we could all get out. It was never a problem. When you got in the smaller southern towns, it was a big, big problem, and you had to reach outside of your own circumstances to get people to do that. But luckily, we could always find people to do it. It was always a scuffle, always a struggle, but there was always somebody who would do it, some bodies who would do it, because never one person take care of this. But there were always some bodies who could do it, and it always turned out well in the end. You know, we were and are the kind of people who said, I don't know who's going to do it, but somebody will. I believe that will happen. And we believed. We just had this trust that it would happen, and it always did.
Do you have examples of that today?
Sure. Today, I went with you to talk to a wealthy man who I wanted to give money to the NAACP, and I can remember that my wife and Maxim and myself just strategized before God. You say this, then, no, don't say that, say this, then I'll say this, then you'll say that, and so on. Finally, we got the guy, and I spoke, and my wife spoke, and Maxim spoke, and the guy said, what do you want? And Maxim said, $1 million. And he said, I can do that. I thought, oh. Well, I mean, none of us jumped up and said, woo-hoo, but I think we felt that. And this guy gave us $1 million. And, you know, we often wondered, what if you had said 100,000? I think we would have gotten that, but it's not as good as $1 million. So we said $1 million, and he gave $1 million, and he's a decent kind of person. And I think if asked, would do it again. But so you ask and you get, not every time by any means, but you do get it if you ask for it, and you won't get it if you don't ask for it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Robert Juchnicki, and my question was, based on your experience working on with the SNCC and in the civil rights movement, what do you find most effective in social movements, and what qualities do you think allow them to have the greatest impact?
You mean most effective in raising money?
Raising money and having impact in a general sense.
Well, let me concentrate on raising money. In the early 1960s, you could raise enormous sums of money through the mail. That's still true today, but it's less true than it was then. And to the degree that I can remember spending hours and hours folding letters, stuffing them in envelopes, carrying them, stamping them one by one. You know, we didn't have machines. One by one, carrying them to the post office, sending them off, and then waiting for the money to come back in. And almost every time the money did come back in, and now we're not talking about millions here, we're talking about thousands. and low thousands. But we always got enough money to keep our doors open, to keep our staff paid, to take care of whatever problems we had. I say that's less true now because people are less likely to give money through the mail. There's a shrinking population of people who will do that today. And so you've got to raise money in other ways. Internet fundraising has begun to take some of the place of that. If you're able to have a large list of people you can write to on the internet and say some crisis is, just look what's in the news lately today. The Susan G. Komen Cancer Fund cut off support to Planned Parenthood because of pressure from right-wing Republicans. And a hue and cry went up around the United States. Mayor Bloomberg of New York City paid out of his pocket to make up for the money they had. But individual Americans just swelled the treasury of Planned Parenthood because they were outraged at this having happened. So sometimes you can turn a tragedy into a benefit, as happened in this case. But as I was driving here to the studio, I heard on the radio that the Susan G. Komen Association has changed its mind. Popular pressure was too much. They realized they'd done something stupid and tried their best to correct it by reversing it. So tactics that worked well in my day work less well, or the tactic that worked best in my day works less well here, but it still works. And there are substitute tactics, and you've got to work on them. Same is true with social activism. Marching, protesting, sitting in, these are tried and true techniques. You can use it if you're for me or against me. Either way, it works. But they don't work with the same strength that they did then. They work, but they don't work as well as you. So you have to find other ways to do it, other reasons to do it. And again, the internet plays a big role here. You've seen internet petitions, sign this petition, stop Joe from doing what he wants to do, or make Joe do what he wants to do or doesn't want to do, and you may or may not sign them. But as soon as one method seems to diminish, another one appears. And I think people who are quick-minded in the activist community know how to shift from this to this to this to this and take up some other means and method.
Hi, I'm Joan Gass.
Hey.
Thank you for coming and speaking with us.
My pleasure.
Throughout our time together, you've talked about different aspects of your leadership, both empowering other people, building coalitions, and supporting an emerging youth population. And I was wondering if you could share with us one or two decisive moments in leadership that you faced and what leadership characteristics you think are most important from those moments.
Gee, this is a tough question. Some years ago, when I was young, I was elected to the Georgia legislature, and just prior to my being sworn in, I endorsed a statement issued by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee that was critical of the Vietnam War. And if I told you that statement today, you'd say, well, that's nothing. That's what people say about the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan. It's not intemperate. It's okay. But then it appeared to be radical, and many people were upset by it. And my colleagues to be in the legislature threatened to put me out if I didn't apologize or take the statement back. Well, I couldn't apologize. I believed in the statement. I couldn't take it back. I thought it was right and correct, so I didn't know what to do. And I'd worked hard to get elected. I'd kissed babies. I'd shaken hands. I'd done all those things, and I wanted to have this seat I had won. And I was exiting a restaurant in Atlanta, and I ran into the Reverend Ralph Abernathy, who was Dr. King's closest associate. And I said, Dr. Abernathy, I don't know what I can do. People want me to apologize. I don't think I should apologize. They want me to take it back. I'm not going to take it back. What can I do? He said, just do something you can live with. And I thought, well, I'll do that. And I did something I could live with. I didn't take it back. I didn't apologize. I stood up for it. And while it didn't happen right away, eventually I won my seat back in the legislature. I went to the Supreme Court, and they ruled in my favor and ordered the legislature to put me back in. So that's always been kind of a lifeline to me. Do something you can live with. I'd never want to do something I would be embarrassed by, something that I'd be ashamed of later, although I'm sure I've done some things I shouldn't have done. But I've liked that statement, do something you can live with. And, I've tried to always do something I can live with, and so far I've been able to do so.
Julian, one of the things that comes across in your life, in the way in which you engage with people and with movements, is this abounding positive energy that and this humorous way about you, and also a very complex way, because not only have you been an activist, but you narrated an Oscar-winning documentary, You hosted Saturday Night Live, and you more recently was in the Oscar-winning movie Ray. What is it about you that we can learn about how to keep up that spirit, that enthusiasm, when there is so much crisis around us?
I don't know why I have a good-natured personality. I'm sure it comes from my family, my mother and my father, and the circumstances in which they raised me and raised my siblings. I can't attribute it to anything else but that. That's the only thing I can say. Reason it comes around. I do know. I grew up on a college campus in Pennsylvania, Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, and one of the young women who grew up on that campus with me has written a book about growing up on this college campus. And remember, there are black kids, white kids, kids of all kinds, growing up, children of faculty members, going to school together, intermixing with each other all the time. And in writing this book, she has interviewed most of the people who are my peers, people who are my age as we were growing up on this campus. And to a man and a woman, they described just awful times. The school bus driver molesting the girls, other people treating them badly, just terrible things. Me, I described just a lovely time, wonderful time, nothing bad ever happened, just a great day, happy-go-lucky. And I don't know, no one molested me, which is a horrible thing, you know. And I didn't know that this was going on, or I think I would have had a different take on it, but I don't know why. I look at things through sunshiny glasses, and other people look at them in other ways. So I don't know. I'm not saying I was blind to sexual abuse, because surely had I known about it, I would have been, horrified by it. But it happened over here, and I'm over here, and for some reason or another, it didn't intrude into my world. And as a consequence, I attribute my years on this campus to just wonderful years, and almost to a man and a woman, each of them has some horror story to tell, not about sexual abuse, but a horror story to tell about their growing up years, and it didn't happen to me.
Well, this actually brings us to one of the tough choices, among many tough choices, that our students are facing each day as they think of themselves as activists. They're faced with, they can save children, they can actually pay for malaria pills, they can donate money or time to an art museum, they can provide resources to a preschool program, they can buy solar panels for homes. But it requires them to compartmentalize some of these issues that can be quite distressing. Is that a necessary talent to be able to be effective and to live as graciously and as happily as you have just described?
Probably so, but it doesn't have to be so. For example, I think these young people have three choices in the world. They can engage in social justice activity, they can engage in social service activity, or they can do nothing at all. And those are not really the only three, but these are three choices they have. Well, I've always thought if you create a world where there is social justice, there will never be any need for social service. If you have a community that provides social justice, that requires social justice, the need for social service will diminish. So I've chosen to work for social justice. But I think social service is wonderful pursuit in life, and the things they can do in that regard will benefit will resound to the benefit of others and will make them feel like much better people. So I wouldn't encourage them to have to feel they have to do one or the other. In fact, I think you can do both or all, but the important thing is they do something, because doing nothing really means you've joined the other side, and you don't want to do that.
Dick Posner wrote an interesting article on this, but with a different thrust, and he would argue that when we provide philanthropy, especially in certain countries in which they're failing democracies, particularly when we're providing food or medicines and social services, we are actually engaging in a practice that will eventually hurt those people because we're pacifying a community that will be prevented from engaging in the kind of reform movements that would change that society. So he would argue that the more we give philanthropy, the more we give social services, we're actually preventing the society from engaging in reform because they're mollified in some way by this. Do you subscribe to that?
So he's arguing that charity diminishes people's desire for improvement?
Yes. I
think that's BS. I think people who are hungry, people who are in need, ought to be helped immediately, because what this person is really saying is that I'm going to do nothing and let children die, let people starve to death, and hope their conditions will become so extreme that they'll rise up and throw their tyrant away. Well, of course, by the time that happens, they'll all be dead. I don't believe in that.
So, with your final remarks, what do you believe in? What are your parting thoughts?
Well, I think all of us has a responsibility to the people around us in our community, the town we live in, the city we live in, the state or country we live in, the world in which we all have a responsibility to help other people. And we all may do it in very different ways. You may do it by becoming a doctor, you may do it by becoming a lawyer, you may do it by becoming a social worker, and so on and so on. Or you may, the three of you in the back, do three entirely different things. Because there are so many ways you can do these things, but you have a responsibility to do something. And if you become a doctor, doesn't mean you can't on the side do something else. If you become a lawyer, it doesn't mean you can't on the other side do something else. You don't have to be a doctor who helps people, although we hope you will be, but you can be a doctor who helps people and who also does this or that or the other thing, because you have a responsibility, I believe, to do that. And I believe if you do it, not only will you have helped other people, and that's a wonderful feeling you'll have, but you'll feel so good about yourself. You'll be so happy that you did these things.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Julian.
Thank you.
Thank you, students. It is so wonderful to be inspired by Julian Bond here today. Julian, I loved what you said as we closed our program, because we can all do something. We can all do something to make the world a better place, whether we're an artist, whether we're a doctor, whether we're a lawyer, whether we're a teacher, whether we're a social worker. So the question for you is, what are you going to do to change the world?